Should hate speech be punished if we have the First Amendment? If not, then should there be limitations on social media and other platforms? Having studied the assigned materials, I've gained a better understanding of the First Amendment in free speech and also how the ubiquity of hate speech impacts us as individuals and as a society. There are a few fundamental aspects of free speech that people should know. Primarily, the First Amendment protects from government interference and the right to peacefully protest. So let's look into this further. On page number 24, it states that speech with a controversial message, such as hate speech or extremist speech, may be punished when it satisfies the contextual standards that comply with the emergency principle. One example that the book mentions is in August of 2017, when hundreds of Unite the Right demonstrators in Charlottesville, Virginia, menacingly crowded in upon a small group of counter-demonstrators on the University of Virginia campus while brandishing lighted tiki torches. The demonstrators' expression constituted punishable threats. The marchers intentionally instilled in counter-demonstrators a reasonable fear that they would be subject to harm. In this chapter, the book brings up what is called the hate crimes statutes and digs a little deeper into what they are and why they're important. Also on page 24, it mentions the viewpoint neutrality principle and how it prevents the government from punishing speech. The viewpoint neutrality principle is important because it mandates that the government treat all viewpoints fairly, and because it means that the government cannot have a bias toward or against whoever is speaking or the speaker in that matter. On the other hand, I believe that hate speech statutes are important because they deter violence, racism, and other forms of discrimination. Since free speech is protected by the First Amendment, it cannot be litigated because of what an individual may believe or what they believe in. But I believe that hate speech can certainly be a crime if it interferes with the civil rights that people have. There are many different examples of hate speech that have become major issues in our world today, such as offensive or violent speech having to do with race, religion, sexual orientation, and ethnicity. Hate speech laws could prevent harm or certain types of violence and uphold human dignity, especially in historically oppressed groups and minorities. When we think of the term hate speech, we could also think of it as bullying towards an individual or a group, either or. Also, things like slurs and incitement should be accountable to the law. The book also argues that even though hate speech is extremely offensive and harmful, people who try and punish it are frequently hit with unexpected consequences. And those consequences could range from bad to very severe. Let's take a look at a couple of famous Supreme Court cases having to do with free speech versus hate speech. One famous example, if older, is Terminiello versus Chicago. In this case, Arthur Terminiello attacking the Jews and communists was a big problem because he was attacking them with his words and referring to the people protesting right outside the building, calling them the scum. That was the term he called them. It seems in this specific case that Terminiello had no shame in behaving the way that he did, causing a lot of chaos inside the courtroom. So that caused a massive uproar. In Terminiello, the Supreme Court ruled that heckling, even if controversial, is protected speech. However, The case was decided narrowly in a close 5-4 decision, which shows the sensitive balance needed when discussing the limits of free speech. Another major hate speech case would be Virginia versus Black. I thought that was another good one to get into. In Black, there was a law that banned the burning of the cross, which also had the intention of trying to scare a group of people or an individual person. In this more recent case, the Supreme Court protected the public from intimidating speech. Outside of the legal aspects, there are many negative impacts of hate speech, and I will bring those up to you in just a second. A couple of those being, it can take a massive toll on a person's mental health, for example, and their well-being, as well as having a very big and harsh effect on their reputation down the line. So say their reputation is doing fine now, but down the road or down the line, that's when it starts to get a little difficult. Unfortunately, hate speech has become a problem that many people are facing all over the world. Not just in our country, but all over. And it's only become a much bigger issue now, especially on the internet, which is a massive place for that to happen. For instance, youth of different ages frequently deal with hate speech on social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. For instance, also youth of different ages frequently deal with hate speech on social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, along with the LGBTQ, because specifically this youth was involved in hate speech on the internet as well. And they're also one of the main targets, or are the main target, of hate speech online, sadly. Currently, social media platforms are protected against liability in speech cases. Many politicians are arguing for some form of regulation of such platforms. The public conversation is heated and sensitive both at the same time, as no one wants to be seen as infringing on the First Amendment. Having studied the assigned materials, I've gained a better understanding of free speech in the First Amendment and how hate speech impacts us as individuals and as a society. Due to all of the information discussed, I believe that hate speech should be reasonably and judiciously punished so that we can protect the well-being of all citizens in our country.